Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey everyone, welcome to the Figure It Out cast for, August of 2025?
Somehow.
I am your host, Adam Koralik. Yeah, I know, it's already August. Wow. 2025. I am your host. I'm Adam Koralik, and this is a Patreon-backed podcast, which means that you can get early access to it, as well as all my videos by supporting me on Patreon. You can also keep the channel just generally operating, but on top of that, like I said, early access to videos, you can get shout-outs, you can pick subjects, or you can be on this podcast, which our first guest here, Joseph,
hey.
You are of such ilk. Welcome back.
Thanks.
Yeah, you weren't here last month. You got sick, right?
Yeah, like pretty sick. I'm honestly still a little bit sick now, but yeah.
Well, I'm glad you've returned,
Yeah.
so we appreciate that. Rob filled in for you. I'm sorry about that, but it's, all we could get in a pinch. Yeah.
I'm glad you were able to get someone and you weren't just doing the section by yourself.
No, I would argue that Rob is better than no one, but that's probably not actually true in his case. But all the same, we had him. So, all right. But in all seriousness, we're going to go ahead and get started here. So our first subject is, Joseph, you get to pick one, obviously. And I think I suggested this, but you were like 1,000,000% on board.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Why don't you just talk about it?
Okay, so, Adam, I'm sure you're well aware from having lived through a bunch of gaming generations on how things work.
I'm old, I get it, yeah.
So am I. I'm about as old as you are. Same system.
Wow.
New system comes out. Old system go down in price. Yes, that's how it always has been.
Usually especially during the course of that console's life, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So guess what happened, I guess about a month ago now. I don't know. How long is it?
Oh, do tell, sir. I can't guess. Please tell.
So you see, Nintendo has decided that rather than make the price of the Switch 1, the original Switch, the one that's 8 years old, go down at all during its lifespan, or go down after the Switch 2 came out, they actually decided to raise the price on it. So that's kind of baffling and what the hell, and completely against any sort of common sense wisdom of how this is supposed to work. Though, granted, the Switch did never actually get a price drop at all, which was already a bit unprecedented. Unless if you count, the Switch Lite being cheaper, but you couldn't use it on a
really.
TV.
It's different models.
Yeah.
So, the crux of this story is basically wow, can you believe it? Switch is 8 years old, and Nintendo raised the price of it. Now, the thing is, while we are joking and saying how stupid this is, and he's right, it's against common sense, because traditionally with a platform, it launches at a certain price, and over the course of time, it's cheapened by multiple external factors, but just, the technology gets cheaper, they try to refine it, et cetera, to make it cheaper to produce, so that more people are likely to buy it and support it over the course of its lifetime. That has always been the traditional model with video game hardware. The Nintendo Switch was an anomaly because it was able to maintain the same price point throughout its entire lifespan and prove to be successful. Nintendo had absolutely no incentive to ever lower the price, which was already unprecedented. This, to raise the price on it, while I will not say is technically unprecedented, it is unprecedented to Americans.
That is true.
So there's a large part of this that needs to... So let me put this in a little perspective here. This is not the first time this has happened. Now, it is the first time that it's happened, to my knowledge, where the system was already replaced, in the sense that the Switch 2 already exists, the successor of the platform exists. Then we got a price increase. That part, I think, is new. However, I can cite a few different examples in other countries where this has happened. This happened with the PS5 in other countries. Canada, very notably, got a price increase. I think the Eurozone, which is just the countries that specifically use the euro, got an increase. I think the UK separately got one as well in the case of the PS5. The US did not. The US did not get that, but instead they removed... I think what they did was they eliminated the cheaper bundle of it, where you could get the system for whatever it was, $500, and they forced you to get the one that was packed in with some game, but the game was digital. So effectively you were getting a price increase on it, but it didn't hurt as bad to the average customer because you felt like you were getting like a $60, $70 game, even though it's a digital, infinitely reduplicatable game that was already out for quite some time at that point. So that was the way of making Americans swallow that pill a little bit more at the time.
And then, of course, there's the PS5 Pro thing that launched at $700.
Precisely.
But that was was also basically the case of, yeah, this is for the people who are really, really into wanting the best PlayStation possible and cannot wait for PS6. Like, they were not expecting to sell that to the vast majority of people.
Correct. Yes. I wasn't even talking about that. I was also talking about the base PS5.
Right.
They did this. Yeah. But this goes back further than that. I mean, Nintendo themselves already did this with the Switch itself. As recently, I think it was last year, or maybe it was even this year. I don't remember. But they did release they increased the price of the original Switch again in Canada specifically, probably other countries as well. But this goes all the way back to the PS4. They increased the price of the PS4 like, I want to say in like 2014, in Canada, and I think the Eurozone as well. It's the US that really has never had to deal with this before. So it's kind of a new phenomenon to us. But what makes it unique is not only the fact that it's being increased, but it's being increased after the console is technically obsolete. It's the part that's the most baffling. So, this is not your normal gaming podcast where we're going to rant and rage and say, like, how could they do this? I think, Joseph, much like you, we like to kind of understand why they would do this, as opposed to the simplistic explanation of, well, they're a big greedy company, so they're just doing it because they can. No. Like, I'm sure I got news for you. Global economics runs on a concept of making as much money as you can. That's not any great secret. Everything is profit motive. Let's keep it real about that. But this is not profit motivation. This is basically factors outside of their control that are just hitting them in the reality. So since the Switch released, can you do me a favor, Joseph? While I am talking here, can you look something up for me?
Sure.
The Switch released at $300 US, and I want to know what $300 US in 2017 with inflation would be now. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yes, you want to.
Yeah, you look that up while I kind of explain a little bit here. So while he's doing that, obviously, yes, as that tipped the hat a little bit there, inflation has become a factor. In other words, $300 is no longer worth exactly what it was 8 years ago. And that is going to continue to spike, as that's just kind of the time we live in at this moment. But there's other external factors at play here. One of which is, I hate to bring this up, but it is what it is. The Ukraine war has caused a lot of geopolitical shifting between different countries. China's kind of hostile attitude towards the United States, as well as all the countries around it, and the fact that they do a lot of the manufacturing, or they did, has caused a lot of issues. Taiwan being more sensitive than it ever has, while it is the primary manufacturer of chips. So when it comes to chips, that's the big part we're talking about here. The chips that go into electronics, such as the Nintendo Switch, are not just anybody can make those. Most of those chip designs are designed in the United States or Japan primarily. However, they're not actually constructed there for the most part, simply because of what is required in them. The chemical components, the material components, it comes from, you might think of it as it takes a village logic. A bunch of different countries contribute to that process, one of which is Russia. And Russia is mostly cut off from the world now. China is another one that participates in this process. And obviously Taiwan is ultimately usually where they're assembled and completed. Taiwan is still doing that, but China is making it harder for that to work. Point is, a lot of this is much more financially difficult than it used to be only a few years ago, and has caused a lot of issues with that. So that's a massive factor in getting all of that actually produced. Do you have a number for me there?
Yes. So, $300 in July of 2017 is equal to $395.91 in July of 2025.
395, you said?
Yes.
That's interesting because the Switch increase is going to 340. So it's actually, technically speaking, in terms of power of the dollar, is actually cheaper than it was when it launched.
Technically, yes.
Yes, isn't that weird to think about?
God. Yeah.
Now I understand the flip side of the inflation equation is people say, like, earning rates have not kept up. 100% true. Mm-hmm. Absolutely 100% true. No one's disputing that. But that still means ultimately the dollar does not have the value it had only 8 years ago. So technically it's gone down. What hasn't gone up is your ability to afford it simply due to what you personally earn for the most part. I'm not speaking for literally everyone, just as a general statement. That's typically that problem is why people get frustrated about this kind of thing. So $299 now is much less than it was just 8 years ago.
Yeah, like a $600 gaming console would not be oh my god, why, if food and rent and everything else wasn't as high as it was.
Precisely.
If we were living in 1980s world where necessities were cheap and the luxuries were expensive, we probably wouldn't care too much. We'd be like, okay, fine, I'll save up for a year or whatever. Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not really possible. But now we've gotten used to our toys being the cheap stuff, so that when they're going up too, it's just oh god, everything is just oh god. So
precisely. And there is a third factor to this, which I don't really want to bring up, but I don't really have a choice because it is relevant. So the other one is that, at least within the US, so a lot of companies have figured out what I was talking about before about how China has become a little bit hostile ever since the Xi Jinping regime has come in. And so a lot of companies are bailing on China. Nintendo is one of them. That's not even in America, because remember, Nintendo's a Japanese company. And so they made this decision completely independent of the United States. And what they decided to do, like most manufacturing in the world, how everything you grew up on says made in China, that's sort of going away for a lot of different reasons that we don't need to get into. It's not the point of this podcast. But that's being replaced by 3 different countries. One is Mexico, one is India, and one is Vietnam. And Nintendo in particular has selected Vietnam as its new manufacturing plant for things like the Switch and the Switch 2. And this actually was how the Switch 2 originally bypassed certain tariffs. That's always a fun one to kick around lately. It was able to get past certain tariffs because it was coming in from Vietnam and not China. However, due to recent issues, I believe it was August 1st as well, we now have quote-unquote reciprocal tariffs on Vietnam, which creates a 20% increase on stuff, which could be where part of this is coming from. However, a lot of these tariffs never really get enforced, so it's kind of whatever. Point is, it's a factor, and that one's more of an ongoing developing situation, so it's kind of harder to say how much of a role that's playing. Yeah. The point is, the tariff basically applies to the price tag and thus makes everything more expensive. And so, those are the reasons that it's going up. It has nothing to do with Nintendo is greedy. It really boils down to a combination of the value of the dollar is not what it was, because inflation is a thing. It has become more expensive to produce this content because of geopolitical forces that have nothing to do with Nintendo. And then, once again, domestic political pressure that once again has nothing to do with Nintendo. So really, none of this actually is because of Nintendo. The alternative was that Nintendo could have ceased production of the original Switch, but I'm guessing they're chasing that PS2 ghost, and that's the only reason they're still doing this.
Possibly. Or, I've heard some people think that they're like, oh, they're raising the price of the Switch to make people want to buy the Switch 2 more. Which is,
that's conspiratorial.
That's
nonsense.
Conspiratorial, yes, and I could think there might be a little bit of quote truth to that, but not in the way most people would think. I think that the reason why the Switch 2 hasn't been hit by the tariffs It's just because everyone else has already been throwing a fit about the price, and they know that if they go any higher, they'll hurt their sales. Whereas with the previous generation stuff, realistically, they made most of the sales on the Switch 1 already.
Oh, God, yeah. Like, there's no way it's going to double from its current point, no.
So, if the price increase hurts the sales of the Switch 1, it hurts them less than if it hurts the sales of the Switch 2. But...
That is correct, yeah.
It's not a case of they want people to stop buying Switch 1s and to just go buy Switch 2s. It's a case of they have to raise their prices somewhere in the production line, and Americans already threw with... And everyone else, I assume, too, already threw a fit over the Switch 2 price, even if the diehard Nintendo people like us have actually bought one. Regardless of how excited we were about it.
I agree, but, like, at the same time, like, I don't know, man. Like, I just don't know who's, like, now gonna jump on the Switch that it's more expensive. But, you know, it's like, whatever. There's plenty of used ones out there. You'll be fine. I think that this was unfortunately a necessary evil just to keep this thing in production.
Definitely.
Because, again, let me refresh everybody's memory on how this used to work. We used to be in a situation where over the course of a console's lifespan, the technology in it got cheaper to produce, largely because, especially in the 90s, the big geopolitical countries all kind of got along. And they all kind of said, like, okay, economics is how we're going to do this. This is the world we live in now, blah, blah, blah. Cold War's over, et cetera, et cetera. And it really wasn't until, like, the 2010s where this started to fall apart. And that's really what kind of started causing all this. And I would argue COVID was really the beginning of it. And then the Ukraine war is the real big thing that did that, where everybody's just shifting. Because, again, I can't stress this enough. You might think Russia like has nothing to do with your Switch, but there are chemicals inside the chips, inside that machine that make it work that cannot be acquired anywhere else. They come from places like Russia, which you cannot easily acquire anymore. And then, so even if you're like, okay, well, find another country that can do that. That's fine, until you factor in that other countries that may have the raw materials don't have the engineering infrastructure to, say, drill the material, process the material,
etc. They might not even have.
So you have to build out that infrastructure
Russia either, because remember,
precisely,
Russia is massive.
Yeah, it is. But let's for argument's sake, let's put it this way. Let's just say that you have this facility, and the big one is neon. At the very end of the Cold War, Mikhail Gorbachev believed that neon, which is a chemical gas essentially necessary for a lot of electronic production, was going to be super crazy important. And so he put a ton of effort into getting that plant built, assembled, online, and operational. And the United States, the Cold War ends. So the U.S. was like, well, we don't need to build our own because the Russians already did this and they're now more friendly. So the whole world was willing to, they already built all the infrastructure. It costs like hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, to build that infrastructure, on top of the fact that they actually have the resource available to them. So let's just pay them. It's cheaper to buy it from them than build out infrastructure. And that's how it worked until 2022. Mm-hmm. So for anybody else, you're like, okay, screw Russia's neon, screw all that, let's make our own. That's fine until you realize there's a sunken cost of like $1 billion to build a plant somewhere that can process neon. And that's assuming you have the raw material nearby to actually use it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
You have to, it's like, I want to buy a new house. Okay, well, there's an empty plot there. I guess you can just build a fucking house on top of it. Or is it cheaper to just buy out an already kind of dilapidated house? You know what I'm saying? Like, I know it's not a perfect analogy, but that's basically what I'm trying to make the point here, is it's not easy to just start building up facilities. And the only reason this matters for your video games is if you're going to have to build up a new facility, which is inevitable and probably already has begun happening, there's a sunk-in cost of making that happen. And you are paying a chunk of it with an increased price on a Nintendo Switch. Do you understand?
Yep.
That's just economics, man. It's just the world we live in.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, it sucks that the Switch's price goes up and that this is kind of the new normal for a while. But I can tell you, this isn't Nintendo. They just sat down and had a board meeting of like the 12 board of directors, and they said, they put their fingers together like Mr. Burns, like supervillain, and just said, like, you know what we should do? we should increase the price of the Switch. Like, there was no, like, cartoon supervillainy behind it. It wasn't just, we're greedy, let's line our pockets. I guarantee you, this is all external factors they had no choice but to deal with.
Yeah.
It's just, everybody else is dealing with it. It's just that when we think of video games, that's what we're most passionate about. So as you said, it gets a little annoying when our toys get more expensive.
Yep.
But it's true. It's just what it is. So even though, much like all of you, Joseph and I are not happy about this news. This is terrible. Not. I at least want to, understand why it happened. And the reality is it's just external economic factors that just have nothing to do with Nintendo. It's just what it is.
Yeah. It is funny that, like, some retailers are just, like, not playing ball, though, and you're just, like, selling it at either, like, the old MSRP or less, from what I heard. I don't have, like, any...
My guess...
hard...
Yeah, I don't have any hard data on that.
Yeah.
But, like, my guess is a lot of them probably don't have any great desire to keep stocking it because they know its time is short. There's not really any great reason to support it. So they're probably in, like, let's just get it out of here mode.
Probably, yeah.
Keep in mind that the MSRP price, so, like, if it's already sitting there in the store shelves, they've already bought it from Nintendo. There's no reason they actually have to increase the price on it.
Unless
it would only
they
be
have
for
to buy
newer
new
units.
Yeah.
Precisely. That's when they care about the price increase, because that's when they have to buy new units. MSRP, man, like, I actually feel bad for stores, because the amount of money they make off MSRP is, like, a joke.
Oh, God,
It's like, it's like, if the system is selling for $339.99... Best Buy bought that for like $334.99. They make like $5 off the system if they're lucky. Like, they make almost nothing. And so that's why some places, that's why, like, famously GameStop always loved used games, because they could buy it from you for peanuts, and then they could absolutely control what the price point was. And that's where they would make all their money. That's not how it works for the MSRP stuff. Nope. But they have no choice but to sell it, because while it does technically make them money, they also just can't be the store that doesn't have that. Like, because then nobody ever goes there. So anyway, whatever. Yeah, anything else you want to say on this, or just general gaming economics?
Like not really. Like, nothing that would really bring up anything that would give us, like, a real discussion. Like, at most, like, the only thing I could add, like, as far as, like, the whole tariff situation goes, is the tariffs are probably why the U.S. is actually seeing this, for the most part. Like, the dollar is part of it, but the tariffs itself are why we're seeing it, because in the past, when every other country got their prices increased and we didn't, part of it was mostly because almost everyone else's currency is pegged to the dollar. So...
almost every currency on this planet is pegged to the dollar.
Yeah.
Still. No matter what you hear about things like, oh, BRICS is coming, they're going to make a new currency and destroy the... That's all horse shit. Never listen to that. Anybody who tells you that literally has no idea what they're talking about. That's not how it works. Because everything is pegged to the dollar. It's just the world we live in. Countries can wax inane about how they want to de-dollarize and everything. It's never going to happen. Like, we're just too tied into everything.
I wouldn't say never, but it's going to take a very long time before that's
It would take
feasible.
a significant force that is not realistically going to happen. Mm-hmm. I will put it that way. Like, what's your primary competitors? The ruble? The ruble is worthless outside of Russia. The yuan, nobody is willing to accept it in any country other than mainland China. Even Hong Kong and Macau.
I mean, when I say it's possible for, like, the dollar to not be the currency that everything's pegged to, I'm talking over, like, the course of, like, another 100 years. Like, not
like a century with some significance. But the reason that the dollar is considered what it is because it's pegged to oil prices. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, even our opponents run on that system. They don't have a choice. So, like, it is what it is. But that's a different matter. The euro is a fun local currency, but it has a lot of issues that come from individual nation states not having the same balanced budget as other individual nation states within that shared ecosystem, which causes unbalanced collapses. Anyway, I like economics, as you guys can tell, but it's not really the right it's not really the right forum for this. But anyway, whatever. So with that said, is there anything else you want to say on this, or gaming with price increases? Like, this isn't even actually, didn't Microsoft do this exact same thing like last year?
I don't.
This sounds really familiar.
I don't think that they increased the price of the
Series X.
I think they
did. I think we even talked about it.
Maybe. Let me see.
Yeah, like, I think it was... They didn't do, like, the Xbox One, like, because they haven't made that in forever. But I swear that, like, they raised, like, the Series X prices, like, this year. That sounds really familiar to me. I think, because we had, like, this long list. I think maybe it was you and I, or maybe it was Rob and I had discussed it. We had, like, this long list of all these prices of everything that they were increasing.
Oh, no? Okay. Yeah. No, okay, I see. They did.
Yeah, so there you go. It's even... Let me put it this way, guys. Even Microsoft, which is, I think, the third most valuable corporation on this planet, is not immune to this problem.
Yeah, it just didn't seem like... I just didn't register in my brain for this conversation because it was their current console.
Exactly.
Which is still
the
weird,
part of this that makes this hilariously weird is the fact that the Switch is 8 years old and we're still dealing with this. Like, it has to have a price increase to offset the price it should have been under a normal, healthy economy.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the U.S. economy is not actually in that bad a shape. It just has to deal with external factors it has nothing to do with. Like, that, again, we've already talked about it enough, but you got to find stability in the world. Otherwise, economies start to tank. We'll leave it at that. Okay, with that said, I think we're good on this subject. Do you want to move on to the next one?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so Joseph, thank you for that. The next one up, this is from Sinjeet. He did not have a particular subject in mind, so I kind of picked one for him. And this is just one of kind of, you and I will just kind of wax silly and just go for it. If you could have, magically, let's say, magically, either like a ultra billionaire or like, a magical genie, it doesn't matter. Like somebody pops in your life and says, all right, you get one console and you get a full library, every single game ever released for that platform. What are you taking and why? And just to throw out a couple caveats to this, it can be a system you already have or you like or whatever. And it doesn't have to, it can be like some odd system where you're like, oh, there was like this special edition of some system or whatever. Whatever your reason is, I'm just curious what you would pick.
I assume I can't cheat and say PC, right? It has to be console.
PC's not a console. Yeah. I didn't say platform.
It is. Okay.
So by that logic, it doesn't include handhelds, I guess. But if you want to, we'll include handhelds. Because if you say PC, like, there's not even a discussion there.
Yeah.
Although that would be hilarious, because if you pick PC and you got literally every game ever released for the PC, like, I don't know, like, how many terabytes of storage would be required for you to be able to have that?
Oh, God, this is a good question, and I'm not entirely sure. I don't actually know. Like, there are a couple of them I can think of. I mean, realistically, it would have to be specifically console, and everything released for it is what you'd get.
Yeah, you get like all of the complete library just poofed into your existence. Everything.
Jeez.
I'm still sitting, while you process that, I'm still mentally sitting there just thinking about the idea of how many terabytes of storage it would require to get every PC game. Well, here's the other thing, because you have to think logistics too, right? So it's not like you just get a new PC rig and it just has every game installed. It's all nice and clean and digital for you. You'd have to accept that everything is going to come with like big boxes and shit. So like every physical edition of a PC game that ever happened, because then you got to start thinking about like that stuff. Like, oh man, do I have the space for this? Like imagine I don't have the space for actually suddenly being.
So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's my point. No, it does, because I want you to like literally that is the scenario. A genie or a magic billionaire, whatever the hell, popped in your life and says you get one and you have to take one, and why? Which one do you want? But you have to think about those logistics too. Because Abdullah and I are going to be talking about a subject soon that's a little bit related to this. And I want to make sure you understand the storage capacity of your own life when you factor this in.
Well, in that case, I mean, if we're having to factor
every physical PC game ever made for you would be hilarious.
Okay, well, if we have to factor in actual real-life storage concerns, then it would have to probably
We do.
It would have to be like something like the Virtual Boy or the N-Gage or something that didn't really do super well, where you could actually fit the entire library in where you live, because like I got so maybe the Wii U, because that only has 200 and something games on it, right?
It's just it's just a little over 200 physical, yeah.
Okay, except that all the Wii U games are on the Switch now. Well, most of them. Not all of them, but a lot of them are.
Sure, but that can be your reason. So your reason is coming down more to storage capacity than entertainment value or financial value.
Well, yeah, I mean, if I have to actually, like, consider, like, where I'm living. Like, right now I'm living with family, so I don't have, like, a full... It's not like I have a full house. But I could just shove all my stuff in and, like that could fit an entire, like, massive library, like, say, the PS2 or hell, the original Switch, for that matter.
Yeah.
So it's like if I didn't have to give any, consideration to, like, the actual space of how I would do it, probably PS2. But
okay,
just because that's probably the most expansive library of games.
Yeah, it's like 5,000 titles, dude.
Yeah.
So that's what you're going with. PS2, if space doesn't matter. If space does matter, you're going with...
something like weird or interesting. That might be nice. I guess another... Yeah, probably... Well, yeah, actually probably Wii U if I have to consider... Is this the only console I'll have access to for the rest of my life?
No. This isn't like something where it's like you're stuck on an island and that's all you get. It's not one of those. It's literally like your life is exactly what it is right now, but you're just magically plopped in with the console and every single game for that console, just by, like, gifting.
That also changes it a little bit, at least for what I would take if I have to consider space. But yeah, the Wii U is definitely still a contender there, just because of how good that system is and what was on it, and what some of the stuff that's probably still better on it compared to, like, a later port that had to compromise some things. That or one of the, like, rarer systems, like in the Virtual Boy or, like, the N-Gage or something that I realistically would never be able to get most of the stuff. Hell, maybe the rest of the 3DO library. Just because, I mean, I have a 3DO already, but finding and getting most of that library is not happening. So
yeah, you could do that because which 3DO hardware do you have?
I think I have the FZ10. Whatever one I have, I think works with...
Is it the top loader or the front loader?
I think it's a top loader.
Okay, so yeah, you could say, okay, I want the 3DO front loader and the full library, so you get the extra hardware. You get both. And then, or you could even pick, like, the weirder version of the system and be like, I want the Gold Star one. Or
funnily enough, like, the first 3DO I ever saw in person was the Gold Star one, and I passed it up at the time, but in the store. But I mean, I didn't pass up the one that I found complete in box in a different store, like, years later.
Yeah,
I was just like, well, that's not happening again. So...
Well, it is if you magically have this guy who's going to get it.
I mean, yes.
But you can get that, and then you get the full set.
Mm-hmm.
So pick one. What's your street here? What are you doing?
Yeah, let's go with front-loading 3DO and the full set of 3DO.
All right. He has picked the 3DO. It's a good choice. Valuable set as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's the thing, man. And there was never a rule that you couldn't sell it. And so by that logic, I actually would pick the Neo Geo AES.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you're going to sell the set afterwards.
Because you're just, like, instantly getting, like, millions of dollars like in as far as the game. It's like some of those games are ridiculous, like $10,000, $20,000 games.
Yeah.
And you'd be able to... in my case, I'd be like, okay, sweet. I definitely have the space for it, because I'm going to be moving into that house and all that. But even if I couldn't, like, screw it. I'll stack it up on the floor. I don't care because it doesn't matter. I'll be able to make some videos.
You're moving into the house and you also own your apartment. So
exactly. So
renting.
Like I could precisely. So I could stock up all that stuff and then I could make some YouTube videos about like, guys, oh my god, I got a complete Neo Geo AES collection. And then for the first time in my life, I'd be like, all right, now I'm going to hawk all this because I don't need this. This is ridiculously valuable. And like, as much as I love the AES, it's like the only system where I'm like, flash card, yeah, that's fine. I'm not even trying to get games for this system. Even when I see them, I'm like, that's cute. No thanks. Not worth my time. It's just
not
impossible.
Worth the money. Too much money.
Yeah. So that's why I was a little disappointed in your answer, because if you had picked that, you didn't even have to rent or live with your family. You could buy a damn house with that money, man.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking of it from the extent of selling it. Like, obviously, if you're selling it, get the most expensive collection you possibly can. But
precisely. But no, that's fair. But okay, so that does kind of, obviously skew the question a bit. I still think, all right, let's assume I had to keep it, okay? I still think I would actually pick the AES because it's the most ludicrous one to have a full set of, just for that exact reason.
Well, yeah.
And the idea that I'm like, yeah, whatever, I have a full Neo Geo AES collection. It's like, dude, like that's content. That's impressive.
That is definitely content, which not a concern I really realistically need to worry about. And
no, not for you. I'm just talking about me.
Yeah.
I will say that I would not pick the PS2 simply because that would be so big and bulky. Like, even I would run into massive logistical issues with it. And it's just so much crap on that system. Like, it's better than something like the Wii, certainly. But like, imagine having a full Wii collection and just being like, oh god, there's like 2 games on this thing that are worth playing, and the rest is just junk on the shelf.
I consider there's more than that, but most of the ones that have been playing have been ported at this point to something else.
Yeah, that's true.
In some form.
But set aside the fun factor. Yeah, I'm just thinking about, like, partially the logistics of it. But, I think that, because, I could cheat, but then, like, the ones that I have already that I wouldn't really care, like, I have a full Dreamcast set. I don't have a full Saturn set, so admittedly that would be kind of tempting. But I have, like, enough Saturn stuff that I'm not really, like, that worried about it. Right. And even when it comes to the North American Saturn stuff, like, I have most of the heavy hitters and stuff like that, so I'm like, it doesn't really do anything for me. Whereas my Neo Geo AES collection is pitiful. I have 5 games, and they're all like the definitive common ones, like Fatal Fury 2, like the only one that's like $40. You know what I mean?
That's better than my collection of none. So
yeah, exactly. But I have the console. I would have another, I guess. But stuff like that, where you just go, that would be interesting just because of how little I actually have for it and how valuable it is and the display of it. But if I had, like, again, we go with your scenario where it's like, oh, I only get one console, like, forever type of thing, then admittedly I would probably pick the Dreamcast, even though I already have that. But that's a different question.
Well, even though you already have it, if you only, in the scenario where it's the only console you have in the future, then yeah, of course you'd pick the Dreamcast.
Yeah, well, it's just kind of terrible, because in that scenario, it's really it's like a crime in my case, because I already have it.
Yeah.
These guys come in and being like, you have to take one, which means you just lose everything else you own. You get to keep the other section you already have. It's like, oh, wow, what a great man. Yeah, so, all right, so with the revised condition that you're allowed to sell it, what would you pick? Because I'm imagining it wouldn't be the 3DO.
No, it would be exactly what you said, the AES. Like, just
AES, okay, so we both agree it would be the AES.
There's nothing else even remotely comparable. Like, if you're allowed to sell the collection, that would be even a viable choice. Like, the AES is just objectively the correct one in that scenario.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm thinking, like, okay, so AES's library is not actually that big, but it's obviously hyper valuable.
Yeah.
But is there any other platform where its collection is so big where hypothetically it would match simply on bulk alone? Even if it had to be like perfect. Like, I know this is ridiculous, but imagine every single Atari 2600 game in like minty fresh boxed complete condition. Could you sell that for the same price point as a full Neo Geo set? Because Neo Geo set was, what, like 200 games? I actually don't know the number. I could be completely dead on there. But like, yeah, I don't know how many it actually is. But,
not if games are going for multiple thousands of dollars on the AES.
Right, but there are some on the 2600 that do, like Pepsi Invaders, and some of these ones are like Air Raid 2, where there's only like 2 known copies. That kind of stuff, where it's like, okay, does it get, if it's big enough, would it offset? I'm not saying we would pick this over the AES. The AES, for this purpose, is still objectively the correct answer. But it's more like I'm just asking, kind of combining with the first subject, talking economics again. Like, if you were to combine it, is there any library where the full library is more valuable than the full AES library? And the truth is, I have no idea.
I have no idea either. Like,
maybe something like, just on sheer numbers, like the PS2 or something might win. I don't know.
even then I doubt it. But yeah, it might. Like, just because of how
I don't
many
know.
titles there are. But
Yeah, exactly what I'm saying. But then again, some of those titles have negative values.
that is true.
Those sports games and everything. But yeah, then imagine like how crazy you have to be. Like, okay, is it like a full complete set that's sealed or unsealed, or whatever? But that's when we just start getting into the minutia.
Yeah.
But either way, the point would be you have to balance it out. Like whatever condition the AES stuff is in, the other library has to be in the same condition. So if it's all just complete but open, that's fine. If they're all sealed, then they're all sealed. You get it?
Right. In which case,
I'm
then
just
probably
curious
not.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's no way to test that, though. That's, like, fundamentally impossible.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of interesting thought. Okay. Anything else you want to say on this?
Nope, it was
in
definitely a
general?
nice, fun question, but yeah, I think it wasn't really one that we could get a lot out of once we gave our answers and our reasoning, and then realized that rules were different than what we initially thought.
Hey, we talked about it for like 15... Dude, we talked about it for like 15 minutes.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, then we will move on. Joseph, thank you very much for participating in that. And Sinjeet, obviously, thank you for the subject, even though you didn't technically pick it. But still, thank you very much. So now, we're going to do a round of shout-outs here. The following people are all Patreon backers, and they get it. They're at the tier in which they get a shout-out. So huge shout-out to Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, and Trey Wagner. Once again, that is Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, and Trey Wagner. If you would like to sign up at any time to be a Patreon backer to, again, get early access to videos, get shout-outs, pick subjects, or be on this podcast, by all means, sign up now. Link is in the description. Thank you very much. And we're back, sort of. Okay, so here's the deal. How the sausage is made. Normally right here, one of my co-hosts would be interjecting along with me, and that in this case was supposed to be Abdullah. He ran into a problem. We recorded our entire thing, and his audio was like garbled, totally unusable content. And we both agreed it didn't really make sense to re-record everything. So here's what's gonna go down. The question he asked me was specifically about the idea, and because he got to pick a subject, it was about the idea of like, how does one organize their collection? And he kind of told his story on what he's going through and how he's reorganizing it and for the reasons he's doing that. Then I got really excited because I'm doing exactly the same thing, and I'm going to interject with my side of that conversation, which worked perfectly fine. However, once that is over, and you'll actually hear Abdullah one time in the middle of that, and you'll tell how bad his audio was. Once that kind of abruptly ends, we're going to interject with another guest host, and then we're going to discuss a few other subjects. For those who do not know, there's a few things kind of at play here. One, I have a house now. I'm currently still living in my apartment. That's where I'm recording this. That's where I film my videos. That's where my collection is, etc. My house was my childhood house that I inherited when my mother died, and there wasn't really sure what the plan was going to be with that until we had a fire there, and then from insurance was able to, fix the house up and repair it and restore it and make a new house. But I am the legal owner of essentially a brand new house, and it's kind of silly to not, use that. So I decided I'm going to start moving stuff over to it, but I wasn't going to start doing that until like next year. But something slightly expedited this process. I'm sure you remember this, Abdullah, because we talked about it off camera. About 2 months ago, I was in Hong Kong. And while I was there, I had just, you remember, I had just installed this like Ring camera system throughout my apartment. And I did it for one very specific reason. I was never worried about anybody like breaking into my apartment. I've never been worried about that. But the way I have my games is for anybody who wants a visual here. If you envision one of my normal videos where I'm sitting at that table, behind me you'll see a door. That door is my office. It's where I'm currently at right now as I'm recording this. And I would argue the bulk of my games are in that room. Not all of them, not the cartridges. It's mostly disc-based stuff that's like 5th gen onward. So your things like your PS1 is in here. PS1, PS2, PS3, PS4, PS5, it's all in here. From Nintendo stuff, it's like Wii, GameCube, Wii U, Switch, that's all in here. Sega stuff, actually the only Sega stuff in here is Saturn, and Sega CD. So none of the cartridges. Dreamcast has its own special shrine in a different room. Xbox stuff is all in here, but then also weird stuff like your Amiga CD32 and Bandai Pladia, like really anything disc based that isn't Dreamcast is all in this room. And the way I designed it was I got these like shelves, media shelves is what they call them, by a company called Atlantic. And they're basically designed for DVDs, but you can use them for most game consoles because most game consoles of the disc-based kind use the same dimensions. You know, like a Wii U or GameCube case is the same dimensions as a DVD case, so it holds the same shit. Except for the CD-based stuff, but those type of media cases usually have an entire row for standard jewel cases, so like your PS1 games or whatever will fit on that. The only stuff that won't is long box stuff like Sega Saturn. So on top of those shelves, I installed, this is gonna sound silly, but I installed like an additional layer of cardboard, taped it all down, and then that gave it enough additional footing that you could put Sega Saturn games on top of it. So I basically am in an office with my computer rig, and it's just surrounded by game towers, all up against the walls, just full of games, right? And the problem with these shelves is these are like sub IKEA. You know, they're not great. They're put, you know, kind of like $100 shelves, right? So they're
or something. It's too deep for games.
yeah. So yeah, it's not so much about the games as the problem. It's the literal shelf life of these shelves. They are not meant to stick around forever. They used relatively cheap wood to produce them. I put them together myself, and I have no construction skills, so I'm sure I didn't put them together quite right. And to be fair, I've put additional weight on the top of them in form of Sega Saturn games and stuff that isn't really meant to support that. But then you completely fill those towers, like all the way from the top to the bottom, and they're at their absolute maximum weight tolerance. And so over the course of the years, and they've been in here really since I moved in and started making videos and everything, and I've just added to them over time every time I get new content, right? And so they basically have literally reached their shelf life. Over the course of time, I can't tell you how many times, Abdullah, I've come back from some trip somewhere, or even if I was in the apartment and I've just heard a loud smash, and I come into the room and there's just stuff everywhere because these towers eventually fail. And I was kind of putting them back together, and then I'd like reinforce them with like Gorilla wood glue and stuff. Like you're just holding it together, right?
Like so,
So essentially, yes. And so what happened, going back 2 months ago, I'm in Hong Kong, right? And I had installed these webcams specifically so that I could see from any place in the world if anything went wrong with one of my towers. And at the time, I thought it was an abundance of caution move because when I put the camera in, none of them had actually failed in like the past 4 or 5 years. Actually, pre-COVID was the last time I had one actually fail. So I kind of thought we were done with that. I thought I had sufficiently reinforced them and it was all good and it wasn't something to worry about anymore. But I had one of those ring cams, so I just put it in there. And that thing justified its existence pretty quickly because I was sitting there in Hong Kong and I got a notification of someone in my apartment. I'm like, what? Nobody should be in my apartment. So I open up the Ring Cam app and it shows me the clip it's talking about. And I'm sitting there, it's in my office. Everything is fine. Nobody walks in. But one of the game towers just collapses. It just falls straight onto like my file cabinet, my printer, my computer desk, and just all the contents just go everywhere. Now that sounds awful because it was, but this was common enough of an experience for me that I also had prepared for it in the sense that like all the Saturn games are completely covered in those box protector things, and you know, like everything is protected, so I wasn't worried about any of the stuff breaking, and sure enough it didn't. You know, I was just like, ugh, because it's just such a pain in the ass because you have to clean it up and like do so much work, and it's just awful. So I came back here, right, from Hong Kong, and I come back and I'm cleaning everything up. And then I noticed the floor is wet. And I'm like, why is the floor wet? That doesn't make any sense. Like, that's really confusing. That was a brand new one. I had never seen that before. And as I continue to clean this up, very long story short, in the building I'm in, behind the wall of this wall that I had the games up against, there is an air conditioning system. And specifically, the HVAC system in it had basically a pipe in it had cracked and was just leaking water out. And the water was just kind of flowing down behind the wall, and it was trying to find a place to enter, and eventually it did, through the carpets, and the wood from the cabinet had actually soaked up a bunch of the water. And that is why it fell. It did not fall because of structural failure due to weight. It fell due to structural failure from being water warped. And I was like, oh, this sucks. And so I was like, okay, I had the building, it really sucked because I had to contact my building and be like, yo, there's an issue here. And they looked it up and they realized, yeah, like there's a pipe that had cracked in there. It had actually been leaking all the way like down multiple floors. And they're like, yeah, so the building covered the repairs. Like I didn't have to do anything. But what did suck is they're like, yeah, we have to basically gut your entire wall, rebuild it, which means everything that's there has to go. So like I had to move 2 game towers just full of stuff, plus the one that had fallen. And then on the other side is my bedroom, and that's where my Blu-rays were and everything. And they're like, you got to move all this stuff. And I was like, dude, this is so much content to like physically move by myself and just like on my like. And just like suddenly it was like, oh, this, because I asked them in advance. I was like, you know, they're not coming till like Monday. Like I got a whole weekend. Like, what do you need me to move? And they were like, I don't think you need to move anything. And then so they show up and they're like, yeah, you need to move all of this and we're ready to go like right now. I'm like, okay, well, I need at least a couple of hours to, you know, move all this stuff. And they're like, we'll help you. And it was just awful, dude. So we end up moving all this stuff and they start doing all the reconstruction, right? And eventually, without my knowledge, there was a 4th case over there. They said that one didn't need to be moved because it was up against the window. So I never touched it. They ended up moving it themselves without telling me, and they broke the spine of it while doing that because you can't lift those things up in, you know, when they're already full of content. It breaks them. So after everything is said and done, after they've repaired the walls, after everything's like, okay, your apartment's back to yours, do whatever you want, you know, reorganize however you feel it. What I had noticed is they had basically destroyed the carpets in this process, so I need new carpeting, which whatever, like insurance will cover that, it's fine. But the game towers are horribly damaged. The one that had originally fallen while I was in Hong Kong was in terrible shape, and I was able to partially restore it. I was able to prop it up a bit, and it was functioning again. And then the other 3 that had moved, one of them is totally fine. One of them, if I were to look at it right now, you can tell its spine is starting to snap because it's leaning further and further forward, which means it's going to fall over. And then the one that they moved without my permission or knowledge, they broke the spine of it, so it's no longer completely functional. It'll hold some stuff, but nowhere near what it was supposed to. And so I'm sitting here like, God, this sucks. Like I'm trying to figure out what the process is, and I'm like, okay, maybe I should start moving some of this stuff back over to my house. But meanwhile, my house is not ready to take any of this because there's no new shelves there or anything, right? Okay, so that's where I was at until last weekend. Last weekend, I'm at Long Island Retro in New York City. Well, Long Island specifically, and I'm just enjoying the con, whatever. And once again, I get a notification on my phone from the Ring camera saying there's somebody in your office. I'm like, what the hell? There's nobody there. I open it up, and there is that same one that had snapped in Hong Kong. It's just sitting there. Everything's fine, and out of nowhere, it just collapses again. Completely shatters everywhere, just everything. I'm like, oh my God, not this again. And so when I get back here, I look at it, and I realize, yeah, there's no saving it this time. If I were to look at the base of it now, the wood actually snapped completely. Like, it's done. It's trash. It's over. Yeah, there's no saving it anymore. So I was like, okay, I cleaned up the mess, and I basically said there's no reason to tolerate this any further. So I took all that stuff, I loaded it in boxes and suitcases and bags. I put it in my car, and I drove it out to my house, and I just kind of put it all in a room under a sheet, because there's no other place for it to go at the moment. And I'm going to have to start doing that anyway. But it was just like, that was a moment where I'm like, there's no reason to try and maintain this old system anymore. So what I have going on at my house is I've dedicated 2 rooms of it that are going to be specifically for displaying games and DVDs and Blu-rays, that kind of thing. But I don't have any shelving units yet. But what I've decided is, Technically, the insurance has to cover it if I want them to, which I know it sounds like a technicality. It sounds a little weird, but it's at the time of the fire I had, there was like a really fancy book cabinet in there. And so the way insurance works, I have the choice to effectively have them replace it, or I can just take a cash settlement on it. So I'm just going to have them replace it because that's just easier. So they're going to have to build me fancy shelving, which they're going to do like next month. They hire a contractor, all this. It doesn't really matter. But the point is that stuff's going to all get installed. And then I'm going to have to like be like, okay, now it's time to reorganize. So I'm kind of looking forward to that process, because it'll be a new opportunity to actually refresh and show it a certain way. Because when I first started living in this place and I had my collection, it was nowhere near as big as it is now. And I started, like, the way the room I've described to you in my office, like, I set it up initially, like, as a theme. I was like, okay, this is where all the PlayStation stuff will go, and all the Xbox stuff will go. And then eventually it became, this is where this will go because this is where it will fit. You know what I mean? And that's a problem you eventually run into. And this has nothing to do with the consoles. The consoles are in a separate room. They too had the same problem where they were originally set up like, okay, this will be themed. This is where it'll go because this is all the Sega hardware. And then this is all the Nintendo hardware, etc. And then it became, where does it physically fit? And so with the house, I'm going to have the opportunity to like redo it and set it up nice and put it kind of the way I want. Especially while my collecting days are not exactly over and they haven't exactly wound down, I am running out of places to collect stuff because I don't really dip into repeats. And I kind of have a lot of the stuff that I want at this point. So the only thing that's really left for me, honestly, is a lot of like weird regional variants. Like you haven't seen it yet, but like the amount of weird stuff I picked up in Brazil was exciting to me. So I'm looking forward to eventually going back there for more like bizarre stuff. But yeah, basically what I'm trying to say is I'm glad you brought up this subject because I'm dealing with it right now. And I'm very much looking forward to when it's all said and done and I just have this like collection on display that people can enjoy. And for those wondering, because in the background of my videos, you'll usually notice a single game cabinet and there's a bunch of Sega Genesis games on there. I have a bunch of that's the cabinet I'm talking about. I have tons of those in this office. And the debate here that's going on now is those Sega Genesis games are going to eventually go to the house, which means that cabinet will be empty. So the thing I'm dealing with is, do I basically take my channel to that house and film videos there? Or do I accept that... This is going to sound weird, because it never occurred to me until a bunch of people in my Discord mentioned it. They did not like the idea of me basically changing the layout of the videos, because in their words, not mine, that set, if you will, is iconic because it's been in my videos for 16 years. And so everybody's just kind of been used to it looking that way, the green walls, the imagery around. And so the debate, and I've been asking people, like, I need input. If I were to keep the set, quote unquote, as you guys put it, the same way, I would have to at least take the Genesis games off there, but I could put like other stuff on the cabinet and I could continue to film there. Or do I just move my entire apparatus to my house and just do my workflow there instead? Like, on the one hand, logistically that would be easier for me, but on the flip side, I kind of get why people wouldn't be comfortable with that because they're just used to it looking a certain way. So I don't know, I'm open to people's feedback on that. Reality may simply win, and then I may have to move it all to my house just to, afford to do that. But you know what I'm trying to say. Like, I'm just curious what people's input is. Okay, and we are back. Apologies again for the abrupt cutoff there, but as explained before, it was just because of Abdullah's audio. I didn't really have a choice. But Abdullah, thank you very much for picking that subject. I'm glad I at least got to explain my side of it. I'm sorry that your mic issues prevented you from doing it, but yeah, maybe next time. But however, to wrap this video up, we're not quite done. We have a third sudden guest host. Welcome back, the evil Rob Thanos.
Just when you thought you were safe. Just when you thought the podcast was done with me. 2 months in a row. I'm back, baby.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. But it's what happens when we need a void filler. So, Rob has been gracious enough to help us out with this one. So what we thought we would talk about, actually, Abdullah and I did talk about this, but obviously I'm needing to re-record it. We are going to talk about the 30th anniversary of the Virtual Boy. Now, I actually did an entire video on this already. However, there was a little more I wanted to add to it because it kind of dawned on me after the video. But also, it's kind of nice to get your take on it because I know, Rob, you were into the Virtual Boy for a hot minute. But yeah, for those who don't know, the Virtual Boy launched in July in Japan of 1995. And then August in North America of 1995. So it's basically hit both birthdays at this point. But we still thought, let's acknowledge it because it's a platform people just don't really talk about all that much.
And it's one that you've really never dove into on their channel. Like, obviously, I guess it's considered a handheld, and that's not really a subject of video games that you address on the channel personally all that much.
Often, yeah, but to be fair to me, I didn't own one until like a couple years ago.
So
it was kind of hard for me to do much of anything with it.
Yeah.
There is a much older video on my channel, actually. I had actually bought a Virtual Boy maybe like 11 years ago. And it didn't work properly, and I did a video of trying to repair it, but the video itself was a gag because I took it out to the UK to have my buddy Ben work on it, only to give it to him. That was like the entire plan, was I was just going to give it to him because at the time Virtual Boys were only like still not expensive, and because he was a big Virtual Boy super fan and it never came out in Europe, I thought, oh, okay, that's what I'll do for him. Not that I regret that decision, but like it is funny. Although the eventual trade-off with that, there was a postscript to that because he was never able to fix it himself. So years later, like literally last year, he managed to take his unit and the one I gave him to someone to professionally repair, not just like a quick fix repair, but like there's like a new board you can install on those things and do all the labor, clean it all up, get it just to 100%. He basically traded them the unit I gave him in exchange for them doing all the parts and labor and everything. So long story short, he eventually got his perfect working Virtual Boy that I had facilitated sort of a decade prior. So I take some pride in that, I suppose. Anyway, go on.
As you mentioned before, I love the Virtual Boy. I was very big into collecting it for a few years there, kind of prior to COVID. I worked pretty hard to get a complete, at least North American set, which I did accomplish, and I did, kind of go after as many of the Japanese exclusives as well. But like there was no way that I was going to pay like hundreds of dollars for fucking Space Invaders or that Gundam game that only released in Japan. Like that was just like absurdly expensive. So yeah, I did have a complete Virtual Boy collection. And that included Jack Brothers and everything. I got a lot of it kind of before it was, super, super expensive. And yeah, I really liked it. I think for my money, the games themselves are pretty fucking solid. Like there's some like legitimately good games on there and like some kind of creative game design. Would it have been better if it was full color? Absolutely. Would it have been better if there was like a easier way of, playing or displaying the games? Like 100%. A lot of the games are kind of sabotaged by the hardware itself, but the games themselves are really, really solid. Like, I can't recommend enough, like you mentioned in your video, the 3DS emulator for the Virtual Boy games. That's great, because it's like, even the newer versions of that emulator access the 3D slider on the system, so you can kind of get a feel for the glasses free 3D of it. But yeah, like, the thing about the Virtual Boy, what I like is that even though the library is really comically small, there's like 22 officially released games, there are a lot of like hidden gems in there, like that are surprisingly very good games. Everybody talks about Wario Land and Tellero Boxer, but like there are some like legitimately really good games. One of my favorites, I don't know if you've picked it up yet in Japan, one of my favorites was a game called Innsmouth no Yakata, or Innsmouth Mansion.
Is that the horror game?
Yeah, it's like a first person.
Yeah, I've seen it. I don't have it. It's expensive, man.
Yeah, I mean, I picked it up when it was like complete in box for like $50, you know, on eBay. So,
I would have done that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's like 300.
Yeah.
Okay. No.
But the game, it's like a first-person survival horror game, like based on H.P. Lovecraft, and it like that's awesome. Like kind of taking that 3D first-person perspective, like, you know, a survival horror kind of like lends itself to like that kind of claustrophobic nature of the Virtual Boy. Like nobody really talks about that game a lot, which is a shame because it's super cool. And I know there's like English translations of that for people that want to play it. Like there's some really cool Japanese exclusives like Space Squash as well, which is like I kind of think is cool. But for my money, the real like meat of like the untapped potential of the Virtual Boy is like the amount of canceled or like just demos of unreleased Virtual Boy games. There are so many really interesting what ifs.
It's funny you mentioned that actually, because like the day before the anniversary, maybe that was a coincidence or not, Virtual Baseball 2 was finally confirmed to exist.
Yep.
It has not. It's been dumped, but not like available online yet. The assumption is the ROM will make its way out there. But yeah, it's cool. The one I want to see is apparently there's a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers game that was in production. Now, how far that got beyond just the title card, who knows? But I'd love to see that.
And there have been a couple that have like leaked fully. Like you mentioned the Virtual Boy Baseball 2. There's a game called Bound High, which is like for my money like a really interesting like kind of Virtual Boy concept. It's another first person kind of like top down perspective where you like maneuver like a bouncing character through like these like puzzle like levels, avoiding like falling into like bottomless pits. And it used like the 3D effect to really good detail on that game. That source code was leaked in like the 2010s, I think. So there is like a playable version of that game. So if you have, like I do, a Virtual Boy multi-cart, there are cool homebrews and translations and kind of these unreleased games that have been leaked on there. But yeah, like there was a Mario Kart game. There was a Star Fox tech demo, which was demoed at E3 in 1995, but has never been dumped on there. I know you kind of have Red Alarm, which is kind of similar to Star Fox, but it's definitely not that. There was a Bonk game that was at least proposed by Hudson Soft. That would have been super cool. Faceball, that first person. I hesitate to call it a shooter, but like that first person like action, a multiplayer game that was on the Super Nintendo and Game Boy. That has a version that was leaked online. Yeah, really, really interesting what ifs of kind of like, you know, whether or not they would have made a difference in the system or not, like, is kind of...
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, the problem with that system is ironic. It's not what it usually is. Usually it's the games or lack of supporting software that kills a platform. In their case, the games were actually pretty good, and that wasn't the problem. It kind of suffered the same Dreamcast issue where it was just the hardware. While the Dreamcast itself, the hardware was more so, it was successful, it was good. It was just corporate issues associated with that hardware. Like, people didn't really trust Sega, one of many factors. People certainly trusted Nintendo at that point, but Nintendo made a system that you really had to try, and you had to try in just the perfect way to understand. And even if you were totally on board, it had no element of social interaction whatsoever. Like, the link cable was a failed idea with that, and it was trying to appeal to, you know, students and kids. Imagine trying to bring a Virtual Boy to school to play in between classes or something. Like, that's never how that was going to work. And I don't know if I mentioned this in my video or if I'm just, because I said a lot of this already when I did the first attempt at the podcast with Abdullah, but like, Ben, who I was talking about before, the dude in the UK, when I played the Virtual Boy at his place, which was the most exposure I'd had to it at that point in time, because my only memory of it as a child was playing it at a Blockbuster and like hating it because it immediately it felt like laser pointers just being shot directly in my eyes, and I didn't enjoy that. And I think it was Mario Tennis that I had played. But when I was playing it as an adult at his place, he was like, the problem with the Virtual Boy is you have to have it angled in a very specific way. That's why they have the stand and all that. But you have to also sit at it with like the exact right posture, and in order for that to not feel that way. And so he was like showing me that, and once he was showing me that, I was like, hey, yeah, this is kind of cool. But like, imagine needing that many asterisks with a system for it to function.
Yeah,
that was basically the issue. It was very much limited by the hardware, and as I said in my video, and I still believe, and you just mentioned it too, is the 3DS really kind of proved that 3D was fine. It was the limitation of the hardware itself and the way it functioned. It is shocking and a shame that Nintendo never did like an official Virtual Boy collection for that thing.
Yeah,
it's just like how
like I was talking with Candace, Virtual Girl, about this in the Discord recently.
For those who don't know her, she is to the Virtual Boy what I am to the Dreamcast.
Yeah, she's very, very passionate about the system and kind of its library and accessories and things like that, which is great because like somebody needs to be the crusader for the Virtual Boy. So this needs like a hero at the top, and like I feel like we both kind of agreed that the two opportunities that Nintendo had to maybe shine a light on some of the good aspects of the Virtual Boy, namely the software of it, was the 3DS. Obviously, you could have done like an eShop release, like no problem. And we even mentioned Nintendo Labo did a VR headset as one of its releases. Obviously not ideal. It wasn't 3D in the same way that the 3DS was, but you could at least have made something Virtual Boy related or adjacent for that. You could have like put it in color. That might have been cool. Or like done a palette swap like the Game Boy Color had, where you could like if you don't want red and black, it could be like black and white, or something like that. Like there's so much potential for the Virtual Boy, and like I see why Gunpei Yokoi, who is arguably like Nintendo's like most unsung genius that the company ever produced. Like
I want to comment on that, but finish your point.
The amazing like amount of stuff that like his Nintendo R&D 1, I believe, was his area of the company, did in terms of hardware and software. Like I could see where the potential of this lay, but the execution was unfortunate. That either they were hamstrung by technology or cost, or Nintendo wanted to just shove this thing out the door.
I think it was the biggest issue.
Yeah.
Because that's what I was going to kind of say. Like in my video, I have to admit, I was working off kind of older information when it came to the fate of Gunpei Yokoi. For years, the story online has always been, like after the Virtual Boy didn't work out, he was more or less, it was put on his shoulders, and he was given the quote room with a view treatment until he left Nintendo, and then he went off to do Bandai WonderSwan. That was kind of always the story, and I repeated that in my video, and I apologize for that because that has since been disproven information. He effectively still went on. He worked on the Game Boy Color and stuff. He left voluntarily, and he did ultimately make the WonderSwan as discussed before. But basically, he was not ostracized as much as history has presented it in a lot of cases, and I admit I contributed to that, but I was working off false information. It is what it is. So I do recant that. I apologize. But yeah, no, very talented engineer, and it's really a shame that we lost him because he obviously was responsible for so many elements of our childhood. But the Virtual Boy, I never blamed him for personally, and it's good that Nintendo apparently didn't either, because he was right. Like the tech was there. It could have made for some neat ideas, and eventually would in the 3DS. It really was unfortunate Nintendo basically forced that thing out maybe a year earlier than it should have been. Like that thing should have been in 96 and paired with the N64, with an extra year of development and possible connectivity with the system, like who knows, you know, like what kind of cool stuff might have come out of that. Imagine cross compatibility of some kind with the N64, where if you know, somehow link it to the Virtual Boy, certain games have 3D enhancements, or who knows, you know, like what if he would have made it to a full color screen? We don't know. But imagining that he had been allowed to do it the way he wanted to do it, rather than being told your prototype essentially has to go, is really a shame. But it is the circumstances that occurred.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to live with now.
Yeah, and I think like both of us would agree that Nintendo, like in its history, has had like a really good aptitude for maximizing the potential of underpowered hardware or like weird hardware. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, like who knows if they had really sunk time into basically taking this prototype, you know, and like really workshopping it or adapting it, or, you know, having connectivity with, you know, other platforms that they had. It's like, you know, there's definitely something there, you know, but it's you know, once again, the unfortunate reality is that at its core, I think both of us agree, how, like, despite how much we kind of, you know, like it, it's a flawed concept at start. And you could argue the same thing about VR today. Like, it's a very isolating experience, you know. You have to kind of just describe like what you're doing, you know, the capture methods for VR today. It doesn't really convey a lot of the positives of the actual gameplay experience. So yeah, it's at its heart, it's a flawed concept, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. I will go out with this thought, because after I made my video and I told this story to Abdullah when we recorded the first time, it dawned on me I actually had one other childhood memory of that thing, and I had just kind of forgot about it until after the video came out. And I never, like I said, I never owned one, but maybe you remember this, Rob, because I know you've watched a bunch of my like history videos and stuff. The way I got my Sega Master System, I was my uncle.
Toy show.
Yes. My uncle used to sell toys, rest in peace. That was his job. And so every once in a while, he would attend this thing in Chicago or just outside of Chicago called the Kane County Toy Show. And it's basically what you imagine is just a series of open tent systems. And inside, everybody just sets up flea market-like tables, and they're basically just selling stuff, okay? And in his case, when it was the toy show specifically, everybody's out there selling action figures of all sorts of things. Now, I used to get brought to this because, you know, I was the right age for toys still, and I loved looking at cool stuff. But here's one, you guys, I don't know how accurate this still is, but it was at least not that long ago. Toy shows, not surprisingly, focus on toys. They don't really focus on video games or anything like that. But every once in a while, you do see some crossover, and the guys selling those toys, if they have video games, are usually selling the games cheap because it's not their thing. It's just something they came into possession of via, you know, could be a garage sale, it could be, you know, grandma's old stuff, who knows. But either way, they've got it, and they're usually like, yeah, whatever, I don't want, this isn't my bread and butter. I just know it appeals to nerds, and obviously I'm here to sell toys to nerds. So every once in a while you'll come across video games there, right? So that's how I got my Sega Master System, which was boxed, complete. You know, I'd never heard of it before that moment, and I got it for like $20, right? At that exact same show, on that exact same day, before I bought the Master System, as I'm walking around looking at stuff, I remember distinctly this one guy had, I think it was 4 Virtual Boys, 3 in the box, and 1 was just the loose unit. And all of them were $20. Just, that was it. He just didn't want them. They were just there. And I remember looking at it actively. I knew what it was because I had played it at Blockbuster that one time. I knew it was a Nintendo system. I knew that it wasn't supported anymore. And I knew that I had like, whatever it was, like $50 in my pocket. I could have got one. And I could have done that. And I could have been like, oh, maybe that's what I'll get. But I remember deciding not to do it, at least not yet. And then eventually I found that Sega Master System, and that's what I went for. And I'm sure I used the other 30 on like toys or something. Who knows what I did. But I remember making that decision consciously. Now, part of me regrets that because, you know, you sit there and you go like $20 for a Virtual Boy, especially in the box, is like psychotic. But at the time, from the lens of whatever I was, however old, probably like 12, who knows, it's looking at that and going, well, one had the box complete system with games built in, and it was by Sega, and it was a system I hadn't heard of. Whereas the Virtual Boy, I had played it once, I didn't like it. It didn't, as far as I recall, come with anything, and I already knew it wasn't supported, so like I don't, there was not like anything new was going to come of this. It would have just been a thing in my house. And at that age, you're not so much in the collector's mood as you are like, I want to try this stuff. So I think the Virtual Boy certainly is more expensive now than the Master System. That's not even disputable. But from a game perspective, I think I made the right choice. But yeah, it was interesting to me now knowing, like, if only I had had more money in my pocket. Like, if I was an adult in that situation, okay, the credit card comes out, we're just buying all these. It's not even, like, why are we debating it? But, it was just, I remembered that, in hindsight, that I ended up selecting the Master System over that, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is cool that you kind of have, like, that memory, which, like, to be fair, you mentioned it, that, like, a lot of people, like, learned about the Virtual Boy after the fact. Like, the thing was only out in America for a year, effectively.
Not even. August of 95 to March of 96.
Yeah. So, it's, it was not around enough to make an impression. I did not own a Virtual Boy as a kid. However, I do distinctly remember renting it a couple times from Blockbuster, and it came with that black plastic carrying case with like the molded,
that very expensive case.
Yes,
now. Yeah.
the very expensive case. And I remember.
But side note, he and I were just at Long Island Retro at the time of recording this, and there were two of them at the show, and each one was like $1,000.
I mean, convention prices are always absurd anyway, but it's it is.
They didn't used to be, man. There was a time where conventions were a great place to get deals. Just like I just said with the King County Toy Show. Anyway, whatever, go on.
So, yeah, I remember I rented it a couple times because... at least a couple times, because I remember getting Red Alarm with it, and I remember getting Wario Land. Like, that was the one that I remember playing a lot. And I remember I rented it, and then I took it back, and like a couple weeks later, I asked my parents or grandparents to like take me back and rent it again because I wanted to finish Wario Land, because I didn't have the time to beat it. And by the time I went back, they didn't have it anymore. So that must have been in like spring of 1995, where they're just like, oh well, we're not going to stock this anymore. We're not going to get any games. They might have sold it. They might have trashed it. Who the fuck knows?
I think you mean spring 96.
96, yeah, I'm sorry. So, like, it must have been right around that discontinuation time. Because, like, I remember distinctly 1 month or, like, 1 week they had it. And then when I went back, they didn't have it. And I never got to beat Wario Land until I, got 1 year later. So, yeah, like, I think that stuck with me, and I obviously, as I got more into the video game history aspect of it, like, in my teens, I kept hearing about, this, Virtual Boy, it was just the worst thing Nintendo's ever done, and I remember just, like, thinking, I'm like, I don't remember it being too bad. Like, I remember, it being a drain on batteries, and I had to sit at a table to play it, but it's like, I don't remember it being the worst thing, because I guess I had that, that childhood little bit of nostalgia for it. And it was good nostalgia, as opposed to like you saying that this thing gave me a fucking headache. Yeah, I don't want to play it anymore.
I do, like I said, I remember playing it at a Blockbuster, like on the demo kiosk like thing they had set up. And I was playing it for like a few minutes. I'm pretty sure it must have been Mario Tennis, which makes sense. And I remember just thinking, this hurts. And at the time, I wore glasses, so that made it even worse. I got like laser corrective surgery as an adult. And so like now that's another reason it's not nearly as painful. But yeah, I just remember it felt like having laser pointers just shot in my eyes, and it was unpleasant. And I was like, why would anybody want to play this? And that's when I had no interest in it. And I'm sure that played a role in that decision at the Kane County Toy Show. Because even then, when it was like stupid cheap and I could have got a brand new video game console for essentially nothing, I still didn't opt to do it. Yeah, but it is funny, like, years later, it's the Virtual Boy has gained some serious respect over the last few years. Like, but it goes to show you like how few people, other than people like Candace Virtual Girl, have really dived into that platform, because like you know about the Jack Bros code, right? Okay, so for those who missed this, Jack Bros is the most expensive game in the North American set, and probably maybe at least the most expensive game in the Japanese set. It's just that the Japanese copy was always a lot cheaper. And the reason for that was primarily down to they probably produced more units in Japan, but also naturally the Japanese version was in Japanese and the US version was in English.
And
English
that is really one of the only Virtual Boy games that you do need to read text in.
Precisely. Yeah. The story is actually like relevant, and all the stuff in it, you need that. You can't just ignore the text and proceed with the game too much. So and for years that's just how it was. So as a result, the American version was just worth more because the English language is simply more dominant than the Japanese language globally. So if you wanted to get access to that game, you needed that version, unless of course you were using a ROM or whatever. Only like a year ago, somebody figured out that there is just a cheat code you could put in the controller while playing the game on the Japanese version, and it would switch the entire game to English. Like, they had just used the same ROM effectively and just kind of had it default to one language as opposed to the other, never giving you the option directly to switch it. If you just put in a cheat code, it was like, essentially a debug pops up and just switches the language for you. But my point is, if you remember, Rob, when we were kids, when a game came out, there was always like Tips and Tricks magazine and Game Informer, and they had codes for everything like immediately. And so you're like, people were figuring that stuff out instantly. And the fact that it took that long for someone to figure that out on the Virtual Boy shows how few people have ever really sat down and tried to play it. Because that's like a gold mine, like literally, because it also fundamentally changed the economics of that game. The Japanese version went up substantially in value because people realized, oh, the language barrier is no longer relevant. I'll just get it because it's cheaper. But supply and demand, it starts going up. Well, ironically, the American one no longer in its demand anymore, and it goes down the price. Granted, it's still more expensive than the Japanese version by far, but they started to balance out a little bit, which is just kind of funny to me.
Well, and from the fan community aspect too, like the significance of that game I'm not a fan of the series per se, but like Shin Megami Tensei and Persona are, huge series like worldwide now. Back in the 90s, it was really localized to Japan at first. Jack Brothers is actually the very first Shin Megami Tensei game in that franchise released in America. It actually beat out the original Persona on the PlayStation 1 by a couple months. So it's like this weird, like, if you're a fan of that series, and I know that there are those that like want to play every game that has been released in that series. Like, that was the last like little Everest to get over, is to like find a copy of Jack Brothers and play it, or like add it to your collection.
And I understand that as like a super collector stuff. And shout out to our buddy Atlanta Dave. So he is a huge Persona and Shin Megami Tensei fan, and exactly that scenario hit him. It was just like he didn't have Jack Bros and he didn't have a Virtual Boy. And to his credit, a couple years ago, he buckled down and he was like, I'm getting a Virtual Boy and I am buying Jack Bros. He got the Japanese version, but he got it and he was just super happy. And then later finding out that he could put it in English, he was just like super happy because he meant he could actually play it now. Yeah. But it's like, those people exist, and he was a perfect example of that. Yep. Anything else you want to say on the Virtual Boy?
Go play Virtual Boy. Find an emulator. Like, they're out there. Like, you could put it on really any
the 3DS
device.
One is what we keep preaching.
Yeah, that's obviously the best one. But it's like, the 3D aspect isn't a requirement. It, like, helps the depth of field. Like, there are
I guess
a bunch of the games where it's superfluous. It's like
it's enhancement. But if you want to experience what they supposedly wanted you to vibe with, try the 3DS version.
Yes.
Because then you still get the 3DS. And this comes from someone who actively does not like 3D content. So that should probably tell you something.
Yeah.
But okay, I should have mentioned before at the beginning of that subject was brought to us by Spencer Puryear, who I hope he's okay, because I have not heard of him. I heard from him in like a year, because he never really responds when I ask him what subjects he wants anymore, but he's still paying, so I assume he's fine with it. So thank you, Spencer, for that. But since I kind of messed up at the very beginning and didn't mention your name, tell you what, this last subject is also brought to you by Spencer Puryear, because why not? This is just a bonus one. This was not originally intended to be recorded here because this news broke today at the time we're recording this. And Rob, I don't think you're going to have much to say on it, but I'm just going to throw it out there as bonus. In Games announced finally the details with the reissue of Shenmue 3. Were you vaguely familiar with any of this?
Yeah, well, I know that obviously Shenmue 3, had the Kickstarter and was released, 6-7 years ago.
November 2019.
Yeah, so obviously, but it was on PS4 exclusively.
PS4 and PC.
Yeah, but yes, the enhanced version is mostly, I guess, quality of life updates, I guess.
Yeah, I'll go over them. I'll go over the updates.
But it's also
I was just curious if you were familiar with the situation at all.
But it's getting an Xbox and a Switch release, which is cool.
It is. Well, that last part is not necessarily true, but we'll go over this. So we sort of knew about this all the way back in November 2024. In Games picked up the rights to Shenmue 3's distribution the day that the Deep Silver deal expired, which should tell you everything about how quickly they wanted to do this. And we talked about what that was likely going to mean. It was probably going to mean being brought over to different platforms as well as quality of life improvements, but it was kind of anybody's guess which ones they were doing. Originally it was a little weird because they kind of teased that they would announce it by the end of December 2024, and it's all the way now August of 2025 before we finally found out what those changes were. So this is what we know based on today's press release, and keep in mind they're going to apparently announce more updates for it at Gamescom in Germany. I don't know exactly when that is, but I would imagine it's right around the corner, so I assume we're going to get more information then. So some of this will likely be out of date, or there's parts I simply didn't know at the time of this recording. So Shenmue 3 Enhanced Edition, it'll be on PS5, which is the least shocking information ever. In fact, the PS4 version was one of the games that they did a full PS4 4K patch and stuff for, so that you could play with 60 FPS. I don't know if it was 4K, I apologize, but a full 60 FPS patch on. They actually took and they made that PS4 build PS5 enhanced, but now there's going to be a native PS5 build. It refers to the Xbox Series consoles. This one is kind of an anomaly. Yes, it will exist on the Xbox ecosystem. It does not mention if they're going to have a physical edition of that, as Microsoft has largely kind of stopped allowing that. I mean, they can still technically do it, but we will see. And then it simply refers to Nintendo. It does not specify if it's Switch 1 or 2. So my guess with these, PS5 will probably be the most vanilla in the sense that it's going to get a physical edition. I'm sure it'll have a digital edition as well. And likely any sort of collector's edition or anything will probably be limited to PS5 would be my guess. The Xbox, who knows? The thing with in is that unless this thing get a wide physical Xbox release, which I would kind of doubt, a lot of people point out maybe limited run games would do it because they've been doing a lot of the Xbox stuff that people want. Not that this necessarily is exactly the same thing, but I'm sure you heard, Rob, that the Yakuza games all came to Xbox, and now they all got physical editions, but they were all just through limited run games. So there's some logic that they might do that. The only caveat to that is in games themselves is actually a direct limited run competitor. They do their own physical editions of stuff. That's their own thing, self-publication. So it'd be kind of strange for them to do that, but at the same time, they have never done an Xbox release before. So even with the other Yu Suzuki games they have had access to, like Airbender or Air Twister, sorry, and so it's I don't know if they're going to do that or if it's just going to exist digitally, which is kind of the original projection. And then you get into what they're just calling Nintendo hardware, which is
it's coming to the Virtual Boy, baby. Virtual Boy port confirmed.
That would be awesome, but strange. No, more likely this is the same situation. You and I have talked about this, where a lot of developers are running into this problem of they want to put it on Switch 2, but for the additional hardware, which makes sense, because watering that game down to run on Switch 1 would be beneath the original 2019 release of the game as far as technical capacity. But putting it on Switch 2 most likely means you have to put it on those game key card things, and in games, which themselves is a big proponent of physical media and does their own publication, probably would not want to do that. So I'm sure they figured something out where they're probably going to put the Switch 2 version like on a Switch 1 cart or something. I don't really know. I'm sure that's one of the things we'll probably get more information on. But either way, in some form, it will exist on either Switch 1 or Switch 2. Whether or not that means it's going to be Switch 2 and it's a game key card and that's it. That's just how it's going to be. I don't know, but we'll see. But yeah, that hasn't been confirmed. The owners of the PS4 and PC versions will be offered upgrade paths, which probably means that they aren't free upgrades, that you probably have to like pay to get the additional content. I don't know. I can see why you would do that on PC. I don't know who is paying the extra money on the PS4 version. And I don't even know exactly what that would do other than some of the quality of life changes, of which we will go over now. I'm just reading the list that they put out from their press release. Enhanced graphics and performance, so they're doing sharper textures, richer details, faster load times, smoother gameplay, that kind of thing. Makes sense. Unreal Engine itself has had a lot of updates over the last few years, and with that additional, caveat of having 6 years to work on the game and upgrade with the not only the Unreal Engine itself, you're also working on more capable hardware. It's logical you're going to be able to do some stuff like that. They're doing a straight up 4K texture uplift, so it's going to have more detailed on the environments and the characters. Then they're including something called DLSS/FSR support, so it's high quality upscaling without sacrificing performances. This is only on certain platforms. As I understand it, this might just be limited to Nintendo stuff. I think DLSS is for the Switch 1, while FSR is Switch 2, but I could be wrong about that. So that might mean it's coming to both. I don't really know. This was an interesting one to me because I wasn't expecting this. Increased NPC density. So in Shenmue 3, the beginning of it takes place in a little village, Baisha village, which was, according to Shenmue canon, was a village with like 200 people. So it made sense there wasn't like a ton of people running around all the time. However, Niaowu, which was supposed to be just like a normal Chinese city, felt kind of dead. There were NPCs walking around, but it wasn't super dense. And I guess they are now going to populate it with a lot more characters just walking around the streets because of newer capacity with the hardware. It's less likely to make the game chug, etc. So it'll just look more vibrant a la Shenmue 2 when you're wandering around Hong Kong. Classic camera mode. This one was kind of funny because the fan community directly is responsible for this. So the angle of gameplay in Shenmue 3 that you control Ryo from is technically different than it was in the first two games. Instead of like the full rear shot of his back, it's slightly over the shoulder. And a lot of people didn't hate that, but they didn't like it because it felt inconsistent with the other two games. So much so that the fan community made a PC mod specifically to fix that. And so they were just talking about it openly, and in games even responded to it and said, this is a good idea. I think we'll do this too. So they themselves are just going to add the classic camera mode, which is kind of neat. There's gameplay tweaks. These are the ones that mattered the most to me. Quote, optional stamina system adjustments, health restoration before fights, and reduced money barriers for smoother progression. I loved Shenmue 3. It was unapologetically more Shenmue. No, it did not resolve the story, and any Shenmue fan that thought it would was just never really bothered to understand the franchise, because Yu Suzuki was telling us for 2 decades there was no chance the game would end in the 3rd chapter, or the 3rd game, rather. So it was delusional to think that was ever going to be the case. However, as much as I love to defend that game, I will say that the stamina system drove me insane and made me less interested in playing it again, which is really a shame. So basically, for those who do not know, the game as it was conceived and created originally, as Ryo's walking around, his health just generally goes down. So that forces you as the player to constantly have to buy food for Ryo to eat, which means you also have to deal with the economics of doing that. And then you have to figure out like which foods are good, and it turns out like black garlic so it was like the best one. So people would just go around and be like, Ryo would just be eating cloves of black garlic all day. You're like, this is kind of weird. And it was just kind of generally frustrating to have to time manage that while also playing the game. And then it was made even worse by the fact that whatever his stamina system was like, if his stamina meaning his health, if you were like really low on that and you were just still working out like where to get the next meal or whatever, you could be randomly brought into a fight at that point with no health. So as a result, they've decided, okay, you can control the stamina system. Now, how much of that you can control, I don't know. but the health restoration automatically begins at the fight. So if you get into a fight, you're no longer limited by that anymore. It just jumps you all the way to full health. That way you don't get like screwed in a fight you can't win just because you weren't managing your food properly, which is good. And then there's reduced money barriers for smoother progression. There are several items in the game you're expected to purchase, and they're extraordinarily expensive, and the game didn't have a whole lot of great ways to get money quickly. So as a result, I guess what they've decided to do is just lower the price of those items so that it doesn't take the player nearly as long to get them. Personally, I didn't have a problem with this, but I also basically used the gambling exploit where you basically go to a table, save right there, gamble, and if you win, you proceed. If you lose, you just reset your save and just keep doing that, which is also kind of like cheating, but like it was the easiest way to get around that. So if they're changing that, that's great. Improved interactions. Cutscene and conversation skip options exist. I don't really feel like I would need this, but I guess I can understand and respect that people sometimes want to skip cutscenes if they're familiar enough with the game. Expanded QTE timing for window for accessible gameplay. I will say this too. The QTEs in Shenmue 3 drove me insane because the window to actually click the button successfully was way too short, and it just became more frustrating than anything else. They clearly are going to address that, which is good. Then there's menu and UX enhancements, streamlined navigation, and helpful purchase alerts. I guess they're just quality of life and updates in the game. And then optionality. So all the major changes that we've just discussed, a lot of them can be turned off. Like if you want to play the game as originally conceived with the food system, all that, you're still going to be able to do that. You just have that choice. That's all they've made official at this point. There are a few things that are still questions, like, again, physical editions, which Nintendo hardware are you talking about, under what circumstances does it get distributed, etc. And then there was a few things that we didn't get, at least not yet, and I don't know if that's going to change. Shenmue 3, famously, it brought back Corey Marshall for Rio, but a lot of the other characters were not voiced by their legacy actors, with the sole exception of Lisa Wilkerson playing Joy, but that was only for a single phone call, so it wasn't very significant. The biggest person who got kind of messed over there was Eric Kelso, who originally voiced characters like Guizong, Fukusan, and Ren. Guizong and Fukusan really just appear as phone calls, so it's not that big of a deal. But Ren is like a really substantial part of the game, and having him voiced by a different actor kind of bothered a lot of people. Eric, years ago, he's a friend of mine, I know this, he voiced all the characters just for the PC mod, and a lot of us were like hoping that in games would include that. I even talked to Eric myself about it, and he was basically like, yeah, all the work is done. If they just cut me a check, then they can use it. And to my knowledge, that discussion has never happened between them. And maybe that's the problem, I don't know. But maybe that's going to come, or maybe they're just not willing to put the money into that. I have no idea. Or maybe they just haven't thought of it. I've tagged them about it, but I have never heard any sort of official response. So that's the voice acting, some of the changes just from who played them, not actually the quality of their acting performance. And I talked about this a while ago. Some of the acting issues existed on the technical level. My buddy Bill Black was the voice director of this game, and he was sending, at the time, he was sending Deep Silver, like, rough cuts of some of the lines and trying to get their feedback. And then he continued on his own way, recording full versions. But they ended up just implementing and using his rough cuts when he was like, no, there's more complete versions. Use those. But Deep Silver never did. I doubt we're going to see those. But I remember him at one point wanting to add them. He was like, the files exist. I just give it to him. But I haven't heard anything about that. So we'll see if anything else changes with that. Anyway, sorry, Rob. Anything?
Yeah, so I do have one question. Because this feels like the unstoppable force meets immovable object question.
Okay.
So, obviously, I know that you, as a huge Shenmue fan and wanting to support the franchise as much as you can, bought basically every variant of Shenmue in different languages and different regions, and everything that you could to support Shenmue 3 after the release. You did. Will you buy a Switch 2 keycard release of Shenmue 3?
Yeah, just to have it on my shelf, but it's not the way I would play it. The version I would play is the PS5 one.
Of course, that's assumed, but it's like, would you support a
I would buy it
release of that? Yeah.
Yeah, I just said yes. Like, I would pick it because I value Shenmue getting a continuation of its franchise over Nintendo's specific nonsensical policy. Now, that said, in games themselves is a physical edition publisher, which I think is what's causing that holdup there as to far as what they're going to do. But yes, short answer, yes. I would rather buy that and just display it. Because I'm going to be totally honest with you. Even if it was a full physical edition on the Switch 2, that's still not how I would play that game. Mm-hmm. I would pick it up for the PS5. And if there was a physical edition on Xbox Series X, I would play that version as well. But the Switch, I could not care less about the portability aspect. So at that point, I'm just playing an inferior version for no reason. So, yeah, if that answers your question, there you go.
Yeah. But congratulations, obviously. I know this is a huge deal for the Shenmue community. Yeah.
It's nice, but the thing is, everybody's very happy about it, at least within the community. We are seeing some of the more mainstream press judging it and making fun of it and blah, blah, blah. I don't really care what they have to say, but I have to repeat that this is not really news. Like, we knew about this almost a year ago. Like, in November, they basically made this clear to us. We just didn't get details until now, but that's fine. And I still want more details on what else is changing. But this is a step in the right direction, certainly. I've had arguments with many people who believe that Shenmue 3 flopped and it made no money and it was a complete failure, which I've been screaming at them until I was blue in the face. Like, that's not true. Like, yes, the game did not set crazy records where it immediately justified the budget of a Shenmue 4. No one's disputing that. But to call it an outright flop is ridiculous because it did generate a profit, just not a comfortable one. But this, if anything, is proof that, like, yeah, there's enough there that we can make some changes, quality of life changes, and reissue the game. I've been saying for years, Shenmue 4 does not worry me. I still believe we're getting that just fine. It's Shenmue 5 that worries me. But, deal with one thing at a time. Shenmue 3 enhanced? Great. Bring it on. You still there?
Yes, I am. I just have nothing else to say.
Then I guess we're done. Since you have nothing else to say. Okay, all right, well then cool. We'll wrap it up there. If you're out there and you have if you're a good person, buy Shenmue 3 Enhanced Edition. I'm not even going to say if you're a fan. If you're a good person, buy Shenmue 3 Enhanced and help a nerd out by let's work on our goal of getting to a Shenmue 4, which again I still believe will happen, but it's vote with your wallet time for the Shenmue community. Vote with your wallet. That's just how this works.
Yeah. And if you're a bad person, like me.
Yeah, even if you're a really bad
Shenmue
person.
3 Enhanced.
Buy Shenmue 3, and then you can melt every copy if you want to, but you got to buy it. Yeah. That's the key part there. I would rather you didn't melt it, but, even if you're a terrible human being, which means you don't like Shenmue, which is obviously the same exact concept. If you are a bad person, you also don't like Shenmue. It's interchanged. They're basically the same term. And just like you, Rob is a bad person. Mm-hmm. You don't play Shenmue, so there you go. Exactly. Yeah, so if you're like Rob and you're bad, you can still put money into this game and get us towards Shenmue 4. Okay, in all seriousness, though, thank you very much to Spencer Purrier. Again, we'll give him credit on that subject as well. And round of shout-outs to everybody from earlier. Obviously, Joseph for joining me before. Abdullah, thank you for joining me, even though it didn't work out from this technical perspective. As well as Sinjeet for the subject as before. And, of course, Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, and Trey Wagner. Once again, Jeb Malcolm, Loke, Michael Kelly, Sega Steve, and Trey Wagner. And Rob, thank you for pinch hitting here. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. If you guys could do me a favor, please like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you've never done that before. Check out all the social media stuff in the description: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, Spreadshirt, Travel Channel, etc. I appreciate the support on those platforms. Thank you so much, and I'll see you all later.
Peace.